Sometimes it almost seems like fate, with certain players ending up on certain teams, as select teams over the years have embraced their players with their fans following suit when they needed it the most. But on the flip side, with various players with various personalities throughout the league being moved around, there's always room for conflict with players and their fan bases to arise. In this video, I'm going to go over a handful of players that are hated by their previous or current fan bases. And with that, here are 5 players in the NHL hated by their own fan bases. It doesn't take a genius to know that during his time with the Winnipeg Jets, Evander Kane wasn't the most popular guy in the locker room. But besides a slew of his teammates having some real beef with the forward, local Winnipeggers also displayed their distaste for number 9. Fans who got the wrong idea about Kane often viewed him as selfish, cocky, and far from the stereotypical hockey player image that they were also accustomed to. And Kane, despite putting up decent numbers, wasn't able to sway the majority in Manitoba, with several social media posts making headlines and even a sign of accusing him of some less than savory dine-and-dash habits were among the reasons why the fan base couldn't exactly embrace the forward. Following the tracksuit incident that took place shortly before Kane was removed from the roster permanently, fans weren't afraid to display their dislike for him. Even after Evander found himself suiting up for Buffalo, Jets fans still found a way to haunt the forward, by even taking delight in Kane tripping during warm-ups in Winnipeg. And while maybe this take on Kane's antics may seem a little harsh, the forward even admitted himself during an interview that his behavior, unfortunately, didn't set well in Winnipeg.
You know, hockey's it's a bit of an older mindset as a sport, and especially in Canada, there's a trend of younger players with social media, and hockey's maybe a little bit behind that, and I think maybe I was a little earlier than other people in terms of kind of realizing that and just trying to make it a little bit more entertaining for the fans.
For those of you that may not know the backstory of events that took place during and after the back-to-back Stanley Cups were won for the Burgh, well, the most recent pair anyway, was centered around Marc-Andre Fleury and Matthew Murray. To make a long story short, Fleury, after suffering a concussion, enabled Murray to step in and prove himself en route to the first of 2 consecutive Stanley Cups to have been won by the Penguins. Despite the roles being reversed the next postseason, Pittsburgh's organization had already made up their minds to keep the younger, cheaper option, and therefore exposing Fleury and immediately sending him to Las Vegas. Fast forward a few years, and in the Steel City, Murray's role in net has changed once again. Instead of being the netminder getting the nod, more often than not, the Thunder Bay native has been forced to warm the bench as the unofficial backup in the Burgh, giving Tristan Jarry the spotlight and enabling fans to embrace the up-and-comer who's seemingly the number 1 guy. And on January 19th, earlier in the year, it became audibly clear as well that Penguins fans have moved on from number 30, as the Bronx cheer emulated from the stands. And when asked about the jeers from fans, Murray post-game replied with no comment. Regardless, for Matt Murray, as poetic as it sounds, we could very well see the same exact thing happen to him shortly that did to his mentor and predecessor in Marc-Andre Fleury. Most of us know that playing in Toronto for some players isn't always easy, as the media and market size can easily put up immense pressure on players, causing them to leave the city entirely. And for Jake Gardner, that was clearly the case. During his time spent in Ontario, the defenseman quickly became known as the whipping boy around town, especially after some poor choices he made in his own zone during Game 7 against Boston. As Gardner seemingly held back tears post-game, the writing was seemingly on the wall that he wouldn't be back as a Leaf. But for the Blue Liner, this was unfortunately not the first incident that gave Leafs fans ammunition, as Gardner, after a slew of defensive lapses, found himself being booed from the home crowd. Despite this though, some of those closest to him in the locker room, when being asked about the boos from the stands, stood up for their teammate. Warner replied with, "It's disappointing to hear that. That guy means a lot to this team." And Riley with, "His teammates love him. He's the most popular guy in the room. He works hard," he says. Even still, for Gardner, it has to be at least easier on the nerves now that he's playing in Raleigh. There's a few reasons why players are despised by their own fans. Besides their on-ice performance and off-ice personality, there's another reason that's a constant theme in this video from here on out: loyalty. Loyalty, as far as the fan base is concerned, is a give-and-take concept, typically. As long as a player follows through on words or remains loyal completely to his team, usually if they aren't acting like a punk or playing poorly, they're going to be well-liked. But for Ilya Kovalchuk, who ended up leaving the Devils and NHL entirely for a career overseas, the sudden decision not only shocked teammates and management, but also Devils fans as well. After rejecting the 12-year, $101 million extension proposed by the Thrashers, Kovalchuk was traded to the East Coast, where he quickly signed a lucrative 17-year, $102 million deal with New Jersey. But after a few years into the deal, when he decided to leave Jersey for good, he not only gave the Devils time to build a franchise around their star, but also gave Devils fans hope that things were going to begin to look up, especially after their first Stanley Cup final appearance in over a decade, in 2012. Therefore, when Kovalchuk returned to the NHL humorously, playing for the team that they lost the cup 2 years before, it's pretty easy to believe that he was the most hated player in the Prudential Center, after he added insult to injury on February 5th last year in the Garden State. Well, I don't know if it can get much worse than this, as a game held on February 28th of last year had the hockey world at a standstill, as multiple Islanders fans took to destroying Tavares' jerseys and even throwing them at their longtime captain once he returned to Long Island. But one has to beg the question, why? Why all of this hatred towards a guy just following his childhood dream to play for his hometown team? For Islanders fans, the animosity stemmed from not only Tavares choosing to sign with the Leafs in free agency, but also not giving the organization a chance to trade him, or at least an indication of his intentions of moving on. Now, in the captain's defense, he's never really been a forthcoming or talkative guy when it comes to media chit-chat. But seeing it from the other side, from the fan standpoint, it's understandable as to why they would begin to see Tavares as a modern-day Judas upon his return.